She heard her name whispered through the bedroom wall at 2:47 in the morning. Not once. Every single night for 3 weeks. Sarah Mitchell told her husband it sounded like someone standing just outside, mouth pressed against the wood siding, calling to her in a voice that wasn't quite right. Too soft. Too patient. Like whatever was out there had all the time in the world. When she finally looked through the window that third week, she saw a handprint on the glass. From the outside. But they lived on the second floor. And the print was facing inward, as if something had been pressed against the glass, looking in at her while she slept. This is the story of what happened when a couple moved to the quiet woods of northern Vermont, searching for peace. What they found instead was something that had been waiting there long before they arrived. Something that knew their names, their routines, their fears. By the time the police arrived at their property on November 18th, 2019, Sarah was gone. But her voice was still echoing from somewhere deep in the trees. And her husband, Tom, was standing at the edge of the woods, repeating the same 3 words over and over. She's still calling. Tom and Sarah Mitchell weren't running from anything when they moved to Cedar Falls, Vermont in August of 2019. They were running toward something, a dream. A little cabin on 18 acres surrounded by dense pine forest where they could finally disconnect from the noise of city life. Tom was 41, a software engineer who'd spent 15 years staring at screens. Sarah was 37, an elementary school teacher who wanted space to paint again. They posted photos online of their new home, captioned with things like, "Finally found our paradise," and "Can't believe this is real life." Those posts stopped on October 9th. But the questions that followed their disappearance never did. What was really happening in those woods? Why did 3 different families refuse to buy that property before the Mitchells? Why did their closest neighbor, an elderly man named Frank Holloway, who'd lived there for 40 years, warn them not to walk the forest path after dark? And what did the police find on Sarah's phone 3 weeks after she vanished, in a voice memo recorded at 2:47 a.m. that made 2 seasoned detectives refuse to listen to it a second time? Stay until the end, because what the search team discovered 6 months later in that forest, buried 18 inches below the soil, changed everything investigators thought they knew about this case, and it raised one question nobody wanted to answer. If Sarah walked into those woods alone, why were there 2 sets of footprints leading in and only one coming out? Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Tom Mitchell grew up in Burlington, Vermont, but spent the last 2 decades in Boston, building a career that paid well but left him exhausted. Sarah grew up in New Hampshire, the daughter of a carpenter and a nurse, and she'd always dreamed of having a place with land where she could set up an art studio and maybe keep chickens someday. They met at a friend's wedding in 2012, married 2 years later, and spent the next 5 years saving every dollar they could toward their dream property. They weren't rich. They were just 2 people who wanted something different, something quieter. When they found the cabin in Cedar Falls listed for $70,000, $40,000 below market value, they thought they'd hit the jackpot. The property was beautiful. A 2-bedroom cabin with a stone fireplace, wraparound porch, and walls of windows looking out into towering pines. The listing agent, a woman named Carla Jenkins, was eager to close. Maybe too eager. She didn't mention that the property had been on the market for 9 months. She didn't mention that 3 previous buyers had backed out after visiting in person, and she definitely didn't mention the reason the last family left in the middle of the night, leaving half their furniture behind. Tom and Sarah moved in on August 15, 2019. For the first 2 weeks, everything felt perfect. Sarah set up her easel on the back porch. Tom built a fire pit. They took long walks through the forest, marveling at how quiet it was, how untouched. Sarah called her mother and said she felt like she'd finally come home, but small things started to feel off by the end of that second week. Their dog, a golden retriever named Charlie, refused to go near the tree line. He'd walk the property happily enough, but the moment they tried to take him into the woods, he'd plant his paws and whine, pulling back toward the house. Sarah joked that maybe he smelled a bear. Tom thought it was just a new environment. Then one morning, Tom woke up and found the back door wide open. He was sure he'd locked it the night before. Sarah said maybe the latch was loose. They started locking the deadbolt too. 2 days later, Sarah was painting on the porch when she heard something, a faint sound, like humming. A woman's voice coming from somewhere in the trees. She called out, thinking maybe a hiker had wandered onto their property. No one answered. The humming stopped. But when she walked to the edge of the woods to check, she found something that made her stomach drop. A circle of small stones, arranged in a perfect ring, right at the trail entrance. Stones that hadn't been there the day before. Tom told her it was probably kids from town, but Cedar Falls only had a population of 463 people, most of them retirees. And the nearest neighbor, Frank Holloway, lived a quarter mile down the road. When Tom finally drove over to introduce himself, Frank's reaction was strange. The old man stood on his porch and just stared at him for a long moment before saying, "You bought the Mitchell place?" Tom corrected him. "I am Mitchell. Tom Mitchell." Frank shook his head slowly. "That's not what I meant. I meant the property. That's what we call it around here. The place where the Mitchells used to live." Tom asked what happened to them. Frank's face went hard. He said, "Same thing that happened to the folks before them. You'd be smart to keep your wife inside after dark. Don't go walking those woods at night. And if you hear something calling your name, you pretend you didn't hear it." Tom laughed it off. Small town superstition. But Sarah didn't laugh when he told her. She'd been feeling it too. That sense of being watched. She started closing the curtains at night, even though they were miles from anyone. She stopped painting on the porch after sunset. And when she tried to explain it to Tom, she couldn't find the right words. She just said, "Something out there feels wrong. I can't explain it, but it feels like it's waiting for something." Tom suggested they get a security camera for the porch, something to give them peace of mind. They ordered one online. It arrived on October 3rd. They installed it that same afternoon, aimed at the backyard and the forest edge. Tom checked the app that night before bed. Everything looked normal. Just trees, just darkness, just the soft glow of the porch light. But when he checked the footage the next morning, his hands started shaking. Because at 2:47 a.m., a figure had walked out of the trees, stood there, just beyond the reach of the light, staring at the house for 11 minutes. Then it turned and walked back into the darkness. Tom showed Sarah the footage. At first, she thought it was a deer. But when Tom zoomed in, they could both see it clearly. A person. Tall, thin, wearing what looked like dark clothing. Standing completely still, facing their bedroom window. Sarah wanted to call the police. Tom wanted to check the woods first, see if there were any tracks, any sign of who it might have been. They compromised. Tom would walk the tree line in daylight, and if he found anything, they'd file a report. He went out that afternoon with his phone, recording everything. He found the spot where the figure had been standing. The grass was pressed down, but there were no footprints, no shoe impressions, nothing. Just that flattened patch of ground, like someone had been standing there for hours. And when he looked up at the house from that position, he realized something that made his chest tighten. From where that person had been standing, they would have had a perfect view into the bedroom, into the bed where he and Sarah slept. They installed 2 more cameras that week, one facing the side yard, one aimed down the driveway. Tom also set up trail cameras deeper in the woods, the kind hunters use, with motion sensors and night vision. If someone was coming onto their property, he wanted to know who it was and where they were coming from. For 3 nights, nothing happened. The cameras showed deer, a fox, an owl, normal forest activity. Then on October 9th, everything changed. Sarah woke up at 2:47 a.m. to a sound. Tapping. Light, rhythmic tapping on the bedroom window. She shook Tom awake. They both lay there listening. Tap, tap, tap. Tom grabbed his phone, pulled up the camera app. The feed showed the backyard. Empty. No one there. But the tapping continued. Sarah whispered, "It's coming from inside the wall." Tom said that was impossible. The tapping stopped. They waited in the darkness, hearts hammering. Then they heard it. A voice. Faint. Muffled. Coming from somewhere in the house. Calling Sarah's name. Tom grabbed a flashlight and a baseball bat. He checked every room, every closet, every window. All locked. All empty. The voice had stopped. But when he came back to the bedroom, Sarah was sitting on the edge of the bed, shaking. She said, "I heard it again, while you were gone. It was calling me from outside. It said my name 3 times. Tom checked the cameras again. Nothing. No movement. No person. Just the empty yard and the dark wall of trees beyond. He held Sarah and told her they'd call the police in the morning. But she didn't sleep the rest of that night. She just sat there, staring at the window, waiting for the tapping to start again. It didn't. Not that night. But when Tom checked the trail cameras the next day, 2 of them were missing. Not knocked over, not damaged, just gone. And the 3rd camera had been moved. It was now facing back toward the house, as if someone had deliberately turned it around to watch them. Tom called the police on October 10th. A deputy named Marcus Hall drove out to take a report. He walked the property, looked at the camera footage, and wrote everything down in his notepad. Then he told them what he'd probably told a dozen people before. Probably teenagers. Probably someone playing a prank. Keep the doors locked. Keep the lights on, and if it happens again, call us immediately. He left his card. Tom felt a little better. Sarah didn't. She told Tom she wanted to leave, just pack up and go. They'd lose money on the place, but she didn't care. Something was wrong with this property, and she wanted out. Tom talked her into staying. They'd invested everything into this place. They couldn't just abandon it because of some trespasser. He promised her he'd install motion sensor lights, reinforce the locks, do whatever it took to make her feel safe. She agreed to give it 1 more week. That was the biggest mistake of her life. For the next 5 nights, things escalated. The tapping continued every night at exactly 2:47 a.m., sometimes on the windows, sometimes on the walls, sometimes on the front door. Tom would check the cameras, and there was never anyone visible. But on the audio feed, you could hear it, that light, patient tapping. and the voice, Sarah's name, whispered from somewhere in the darkness. Sarah started recording audio on her phone, trying to capture the voice so they'd have proof it wasn't in their heads. On October 14th, she captured something. In the recording, you can hear the house settling, the faint sound of wind through the trees. And then, at 2:47 a.m., you can hear breathing. Slow, deep breaths, like someone standing right outside the window. And then her name, whispered so softly it's almost inaudible. But it's there. Sarah. Tom listened to it and felt his blood turn cold. That wasn't a person playing a prank. That voice didn't sound human. It sounded wrong. Like someone trying to mimic human speech, but not quite getting it right. Tom called Deputy Hall again. This time he brought a senior officer, Sergeant Linda Reeves. They listened to the recording. They reviewed all the camera footage. Sergeant Reeves had been on the force for 22 years, and Tom could see something in her face. Recognition, like she'd seen this before. She asked if they'd talked to Frank Holloway. Tom said yes. She asked what Frank had told them. Tom repeated the warning about not walking the woods at night. Sergeant Reeves nodded slowly. She said, "Frank's lived here longer than anyone. If he told you to stay inside after dark, you should listen." Tom asked what she meant. She looked at Sarah, then back at Tom. She said, "This property has a history. I can't get into all the details, but you're not the first people to report these kinds of disturbances. The family before you left, after 4 months. The family before them lasted 6 weeks. Nobody's lived here successfully for more than a year since 1998. Sarah asked what happened in 1998. Sergeant Reeves didn't answer. She just said, "If this continues, you need to seriously consider relocating." But they couldn't relocate. They'd put every dollar they had into this property. They had no savings left, no family to move in with. They were trapped. Sarah asked if the police could do anything. Patrol the area, set up surveillance, something. Sergeant Reeves promised they'd increase patrols, but in a town with 2 full-time deputies and 4 part-time officers covering 60 square miles, there was only so much they could do. She told them to keep documenting everything and to call immediately if they felt threatened. Then she left. Sarah broke down crying after they drove away. She told Tom she couldn't do this anymore. She was sleeping 2 hours a night. She was jumping at every sound. She felt like she was losing her mind. Tom held her and promised her they'd figure it out. They'd find a way out of this. He had no idea that in 3 days, Sarah would be gone. October 17th, the night Sarah Mitchell disappeared. Tom was downstairs making tea. Sarah was in the bedroom, trying to rest. It was 10:30 p.m., and she'd barely slept in days. Tom heard her scream. He ran upstairs. She was standing at the window, pointing at the woods. She said, "It's there, right there, I can see it." Tom looked. At first he saw nothing, just trees, just darkness. Then he saw what Sarah was seeing, a light, a faint flickering light deep in the forest, like a lantern or a flashlight moving slowly between the trees. Tom grabbed his phone, pulled up the camera feed. The backyard camera showed nothing, but the side camera caught something. A figure, walking slowly along the tree line, heading toward the back of the property. Sarah begged Tom not to go outside, but he couldn't just stand there. Someone was on their property. He needed to confront them. He grabbed his flashlight and his phone, told Sarah to lock the door behind him and call 911 if he wasn't back in 10 minutes. He walked out into the night. The motion sensor lights lit up the backyard. Everything looked normal. He walked to the edge of the woods where he'd seen the figure. The light he'd seen from the window was gone now. No flashlight, no lantern, just darkness. He called out, "I know you're out there. The police are on their way. You need to leave now." Silence. Then, from somewhere deep in the trees, he heard a voice, Sarah's voice, calling his name. "Tom, help me, Tom." His blood went cold because Sarah was in the house. He'd just left her there. He spun around. The house was lit up. He could see their bedroom window. Sarah was standing there watching him. He could see her silhouette, but the voice in the woods called out again, "Tom, please, help me." His mind fractured. Logic said it was impossible. Sarah was in the house, but the voice sounded exactly like her, terrified, desperate, calling for help. He took one step toward the woods, then stopped. Something was wrong. This was a trick. It had to be. He ran back to the house. He found the back door unlocked, standing open. He was certain he'd heard Sarah lock it behind him. He ran upstairs. The bedroom was empty. Sarah's phone was on the nightstand. Her shoes were by the bed. The window was open. Cold air poured in. Tom's heart hammered in his chest. He called her name. No answer. He ran downstairs. The front door was closed, locked from the inside. He ran back outside, screaming her name. He checked the driveway. Their car was still there. He called 911, told them his wife was missing. The dispatcher told him to stay on the line. Help was on the way. Tom ran to the edge of the woods, shining his flashlight into the trees. And that's when he saw them. Footprints. Bare footprints, leading from the back porch into the forest. Sarah's feet. He followed them, 20 feet into the trees, 40 feet, 60. The prints just kept going, deeper into the darkness. And then his flashlight caught something on the ground. Sarah's nightshirt, torn, lying in a small clearing. He picked it up with shaking hands, and from somewhere deeper in the forest, he heard laughter. Not Sarah's voice. Something else. Something that sounded nothing like human laughter. Police arrived within 15 minutes. Deputy Hall and Sergeant Reeves, along with 3 state troopers and a K-9 unit. They searched the woods for 6 hours that night. The dog lost Sarah's scent at a creek 200 yards from the house. It was like she'd just vanished. Tom told them everything. The footprints, the voice in the woods, the torn nightshirt. They found the footprints. They documented everything. But there was no sign of Sarah, no blood, no sign of a struggle. Just those barefoot prints leading into the forest and ending at the creek. Tom was questioned for 3 hours. Where had he been? Had they been fighting? Was there any reason Sarah might have run away? Tom broke down, told them she hadn't run away. Something took her, something in the woods. He could see it in their faces. They thought he was in shock, possibly delusional, possibly guilty. Sergeant Reeves pulled him aside. She asked him quietly if he'd hurt his wife. Tom looked her in the eyes and said, "Listen to the voice memo on Sarah's phone, the one from October 14th. Then tell me if you think I'm responsible for this." The investigation into Sarah Mitchell's disappearance consumed Cedar Falls. Search teams combed the forest for 2 weeks. Drones flew overhead with thermal cameras. Volunteers from neighboring towns showed up with ATVs and search dogs. They covered 20 square miles of dense woods, checking every trail, every creek bed, every abandoned hunting cabin. They found nothing. No clothing, no personal items, no sign of Sarah. The local news picked up the story. Woman vanishes from rural Vermont property. National outlets followed. Tom did interviews, pleading for information, asking anyone who'd seen anything to come forward. The police brought in specialists. Forensic teams processed the house. They found no signs of forced entry. No signs of a struggle. Sarah vanished without a trace. But before she did, she said she kept hearing her name being called. From the woods. If you hear someone calling your name tonight, don't answer. Don't look. And whatever you do, lock your windows and doors. What do you think took Sarah? Drop your theories in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more chilling true horror stories like this. You might need the warning.